I don't know.
Say it with me. I don't know.
Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 119 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob and I interview two guests, Gayle Jordan, formerly featured on episode 79, who's now running for state senate in Tennessee as an atheist, and our second guest, blogger and activist Nina Jackel of ladyfreethinker.org, which has generated over 1 million views. In the post-Christian experience, we go from believing in God to not believing in God, and we can get stuck in that stage of pushing against what we no longer believe in. Perhaps after the grieving process, it might be healthy for us to redirect our energies to something that we do believe in. Today, our guests are both modeling that for us. They put themselves out there in active public forums to be agents of change in the world, working towards promoting the things that they're for. Many of us got into Christianity because it was a vehicle through which we could express our core values: love, compassion, healing, improving people's lives, and whatnot. And Gayle is addressing issues that would improve the lives of Tennesseans, like healthcare, education, and equal rights. Nina is working for animal rights and human rights. We're not focusing on Nina's religious deconversion because she really didn't have one, her mother being a moderate Episcopal and her dad being a moderate Bronx Jew. Gayle is an ex-Christian, and we covered her story in episode 79, as I mentioned. So this episode is a bit of a detour from our regular subject. I hope you'll enjoy it. We taped these conversations on September 18th and 24th, 2016. We always hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast, give it 5 stars, or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show is available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways: on a per-episode basis through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA Podcast. Or leave a donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. We're also running a Indiegogo campaign to raise money to upgrade our equipment, and that's at indiegogo.com/project/EA Podcast Equipment Upgrade. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green called Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. And the bumper music on this episode is by Sam Mayer, recorded on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. So back on episode 79, we got your religious journey. Mm-hmm. Today we're going to talk about a different journey. Uh-huh. And actually we hinted to it back at that episode.
I wondered if you remembered that.
I just remembered because you were like, you should run for office. And you were kind of like,
You're thinking about it.
Yeah, it was kind of a hint that there might be something in the cards. And then sure enough, there was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we are we're taping this on September 24th.
Right.
And the election is
November 8th.
November 8th.
Mm-hmm.
Who's counting, though? Huh? Wow.
Right.
So it is ticking down.
6 weeks from Tuesday.
State Senate,
Senate,
District
Tennessee.
14.
Yes.
And we're going to say this several times throughout the show, and that is Gayle Jordan for Senate14.com.
Yes.
Thank you.
Check that out. Absolutely.
That's where you can donate. That's where you can learn their policies, probably, right? Or
That's where you can volunteer, request a yard sign, all the usual. Yes.
we just put a yard sign up as
Awesome.
as you were coming up this morning. Just
you.
No, you brought it.
Right.
It sounded like I put it up just so you would see it. But I'm not above that, though.
So, Gayle, a former church lady, let's see, now you're running as a Democrat in a largely Republican area against an incumbent who's dark, deep red and
handsome.
Very nice hair and nice
hair. Yes, nice Christian hair.
He doesn't have a law degree, though. I was looking him up. He has a bachelor's in poli-sci, I think.
Yes, he was formerly an insurance agent, I think, but he doesn't do that anymore.
So insurance salesman.
Yeah, so all those things. So what's the good news? I mean, you've got so many. I mean, those are humps to get over. Just an incumbent running against an incumbent is hard.
Absolutely,
So how do you keep yourself going? How's things going? I suppose is the question.
It's a good question, Bob, and thank you for asking that, and thank you for your sensitivity to the math and the odds that are against us. We are a little tiny bobbing blue boat in a giant Red Sea. So we have had to, from the beginning, our objective has always been broader than what are the poll numbers, how are we doing. It's never been binary. It's never been we have this one goal and we're pointing toward November 8th. It's always been so much more broad than that. It's always been about initiating the conversation, letting the voters know that there is another side of it. Most of your listeners may know, your Tennessee listeners know, your broader audience may not know, Tennessee is under the control of a Republican supermajority. And what that means is the Republicans can go about doing business without even any input from the Democrats. And that, as we all know, is not a healthy environment.
No.
I'm trying to say this earnestly. If it were a Democratic supermajority, it probably wouldn't be healthy either.
Exactly.
Probably be a little bit.
I'm a believer in a two-party system.
Absolutely.
I'm a believer in checks and balances.
That's why we have that.
We say all the time on the show, stay in the room with difference.
And I absolutely think that both voices are important. They're an important counterbalance to the other, one to the other. And we don't have that here in Tennessee.
It's a lack of accountability.
Right. And the voters don't even know what the other side of the issue is. And so they're, and that's not healthy for anybody. It's certainly not healthy for the folks that need to hear from the Democratic side and need to hear what our issues are and need to hear what our solutions to those problems that are real in Tennessee might be. So our objective has always been broader than November 8th. This is the long game. This is it is so much more important to be visible, to be out there. We've you probably did the same thing as parents. When we raise our children, we try to teach them that you don't just do easy things.
Take the path of least resistance.
We don't do that, and so we know what we're up against here. We've never not known what we're up against here, but in the grand scheme of things, we are hugely successful because we've been getting out there. We've been talking to voters. We've gotten interaction. We've gotten feedback. That's the critical thing. Is what do these voters feel like they need in their district? What are the problems that they see they face? So,
I'm a big fan of this Teddy Roosevelt quote where he said, "It's not the critic who counts, not the one who sits in the stands criticizing the one in the field, where there's blood, sweat, and tears, and who might fail, but will have failed trying." And that's kind of what I hear you saying is that almost apologizing for we may not win, but here's the longer thing. But I'm just telling you, the cool thing about American politics is you're just a regular citizen. You're just a regular part of the demographic or the population, and you said, I want to make change, and you literally just took that step and said, go do it. And so the rest of us can say, oh, she won't win, or she doesn't have a chance, or whatever. But I'm telling you, I totally agree. That's already a success because everything's baby steps anyway.
Yeah.
And I
we're
want
going
to
to
say
make change.
that there are a group of women, of which I'm a part of, women who are running for office in this election cycle, and all of us have that same story. It was one of the taglines for my campaign is "Enough is enough," and it, of course, it refers to the Republican leadership and the lack of interest in negotiating or working through. And this group of women are all women who have taken that step. You know, we're not all of us are rookies. We're not professional politicians. We've never run before. We don't know how to do a campaign, but this is something has to give. We have to speak up. We have to give the voters an option. We have to get the other side of the potential solutions out there. So
Sure.
yeah, it has been a success.
But you're an out atheist, and is that an issue? Really? I mean, has anybody ever said, is your opponent pushing it? Or do people come up to you, or is
That's a good question,
Yeah.
especially here in Tennessee,
Yeah.
where it is so very religious. I made a determination before I ever started running that I was not going to either run on or hide from my secularism, my atheism, and I've done that very thing. I was early on. I was endorsed by the Free Thought Equality Fund, which that's an honor in and of itself from the American Humanist Association. And and the first press release that came out, you know, talked about my affiliation with Murfreesboro Freethinkers, which is our local social. You know, we fall into the broad category of secular group. Out on it has not been an issue, and when it has come up in a friendly group, you know, Democrats generally are more appreciative of the separation of church and state. So even though it may startle some folks, because even here in Tennessee, some folks don't think they've ever met a non-believer before. Oh, they probably have, but they don't know they have.
Yeah.
So in that kind of environment, you know, when I tell what my position is, it may take them just a moment of adjustment, but they're pretty accepting. It hasn't become an issue on the other side. And I can't tell you why. That would be on him to be able to explain why he hasn't gone after that. He's a very religious person himself, and he has shown that he is not. He doesn't seem to think that the separation of church and state is as important as maybe you and I would. Is that a nice way to say it?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
So it has surprised me a little bit that it hasn't come up, and I'm prepared for it.
Yeah, my sense is if this was a real close race, he'd be using it. He'd use anything he could.
I would think so.
You know,
I would think that that's...
Do you have some sense of how much more he's raised monetarily than you?
Well, as you know, that's public knowledge. We have to disclose.
Have that knowledge,
we have to disclose this stuff to the Election Commission. So, I have raised my modest amount for a state senate run, which is about $10,000 or $12,000, reasonable. He has $225,000, and I think maybe even more than that when this next disclosure comes out. I have my own opinion about that. You know, he has run for U.S. Congress before. I speculate that's probably what's in the works. You don't need $225,000 to run a state senate campaign, particularly not in a dominant. You're the dominant Republican. You're the dominant party. I'm an unknown. So that's my speculation. I don't know.
When he ran against Desjardins for Congress, he raised $750,000.
My gosh.
So he does have.
He's one of the highest PAC contribution receivers in the state.
Yeah.
And where's that money come from? Do you know?
Oh yeah, you can look at it. If you go to my website, you can find a direct link to his disclosure because it's relevant. Out of state interests that are interested in our charter schools and the voucher system, all those things that we've been complaining about. I've got a story about a young woman. That it just take me a minute to share it. She was, of course, outstanding young woman. She was 2 months from graduating from law school, president of everything, beautiful, smart, all of that. And she was killed in a car accident in a car that had a GM recall. It was an acknowledged GM recall. And her parents, who are Tennesseans, they're in the Clarksville area, in their grief and in trying to give her life meaning, worked with Tennessee legislators to require that before a car dealership can sell a car with a recall on it, it has to be prepared. Simply put the burden on the car dealership rather than allowing a car dealership to sell you or I a used car with a recall, a safety recall, which means can kill you recall.
I think it was a key ignition thing.
It was a faulty ignition switch, and so these parents worked with Tennessee legislators. They crafted what's known as Laura's Law, and when they brought it to the Transportation Committee, and my opponent's the chair of the Transportation Committee, When the legislation was introduced, he immediately followed it up with what is known as an unfriendly amendment. And in other words, the amendment he offered had the exact opposite effect. It put the burden back on you and I as the consumer, and of course he protected the car dealerships. And keep in mind, this is a GM recall, so the financial burden falls to GM, not the used car dealerships. It's an inconvenience for the used car dealerships to have to do these repairs, and so my opponent stepped in and protected those car dealerships. And I'll let you take a guess on his PAC disclosure form where he's gotten some of his contributions from. So that tells that story.
Car dealers.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah.
You know, it seems that it's pretty stereotypical maybe on my part, but my feeling is that Republicans are really good at representing businesses and corporations, and Democrats are better at representing people.
Well,
Citizens, yeah.
That's what one of my blog posts, and I've got a continuing addition to my blog tab on my website, is that he's choosing power, party, and profits over people every time. And if you look through his voting record and his legislation, like as I said, I've mentioned the charter schools and I mentioned this Laura's Law, but it always seems to do that. And where are the people in this? Where are supporting the people in this? It's also it's the mentality that has led our Republican supermajority not to bring Insure Tennessee. That comes at $0 and 0 cents to the state budget. Whatever shortfall the federal government has, up to 10%, the Hospital Association of Tennessee has agreed to cover because they're suffering because they're not getting the reimbursements. There is no reason not to pass that. Not only do you have the fiscal reason, which is the burden in Tennessee,
you have the humanitarian,
but you have the humanitarian cost of these people suffering and dying from treatable diseases. It's obscene.
It is. For modern America, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've just finished watching Breaking Bad. This has a point. And if you've seen it, you know that he everything he did for the family, throughout the whole thing. By the end, he admits he did it for himself. But the whole time, and he said, honey, I'm protecting this family. And she says, well, who's going to protect us protect the family from the person protecting the family? Because he just had in his head, I'm doing it for you. And I feel like that when Republicans do things that are for business and not necessarily directly for the people, they tell themselves, I'm actually doing this for you, to make themselves feel conscientious.
I actually refer to them as, the ever-present parent. They will let you know when you need something, and they'll let you know if and when you're going to get that. This is the mentality that we have coming out of our governing.
Isn't that ironic, though? Because they're typically they're one of their platforms is smaller government.
Yeah, stay out of my life.
Stay out of my life, and then transvaginal ultrasound.
Well, and here in Tennessee,
how much more into your life can you get?
And here in Tennessee, small government, but we need to have a monitor at every high school bathroom door to make sure. This. Yes, it's absolutely
it's Orwellian.
Ironic.
While out of the other side of the mouth,
And didn't you say that Tracy? He talks a good game when he's in front of people. And it makes you think. Is
he charismatic? I've never seen him.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics. He's very, very conflict averse, and I'll tell you my experience with him. The League of Women Voters schedules a forum during the election cycle and has given all of the candidates a list of 5 dates. Which of these 5 dates will work for you to have a public forum at the Rutherford County Courthouse? None of them are convenient for him. None of the 5 are convenient for him. He and I were on one education panel together back some time ago, and I was looking forward to doing it in all of the counties and looking forward to more of that. And after one, he has not been available for any other kind of encounter. I think he's very conflict averse. I hear a lot in the district about what a nice guy he is, and he does have he has nice hair and teeth, no doubt.
Oh, this Tennessee good old boy bullshit.
So I have seen him pick up paper plates after a luncheon, and I've seen him pick up chairs, and on the surface he's a really nice guy, but would a really nice guy let his fellow neighbors suffer and die of treatable diseases? Would a really nice guy undermine public education? Would a really nice guy vote and sponsor to take away collective bargaining rights from our teachers' unions. Bob, you know that. You know how that has so undermined public education. So I'm having to counter this superficial, good old boy, all shucks kind of personality. and I understand that he's charismatic. I understand that he's attractive. But the thing I keep trying to educate voters about is look at his voting record. What has he done to support the people of District 14? What has he done to make life better? In the 12 years he's been there, he's chair of the Transportation Committee. What has he done to improve transportation? Look at his voting record, folks. That's the thing that I keep trying to repeat.
Right. Well, I could see why he doesn't want to
take you on.
Yeah, or be seen with you in a public forum. I mean, where's the percentage in that for him?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, better to just not say anything.
Which,
just,
of course, is in his favor.
Engage.
But whose interest should we both be working in? In ourselves? Yes, you're right. In his benefit, yes, he shouldn't. If I were his campaign manager, I'd say, do not give that girl any oxygen. She knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
But that's not our objective. Our objective is to do the best thing by the citizens of the district, and this is not being able to have this free exchange of ideas is not in the best interest of any of the voters. And so once again, this is this is another example of who are we working for? Who are we working to serve? And what are we trying to do for the district?
Yeah. Would having Hillary at the top of the what do I call it? Ticket? Yes. Would that help at all? You think?
Bob, I am not.
Maybe not in Tennessee.
I'm kind of a political junkie. I enjoy all of it, but I'm not terribly knowledgeable about it. It's hard for me. I'm on Nate Silver's 538 every day looking at those statistics, but I would tell you that this is the one thing that I've observed. What is typically known as campaign physics or election physics, I think they're no longer physics. I think this election cycle has shown us that what we thought we could build on, what we thought was a sure thing about a lot of things now, having said that, it looks like the Republicans are beginning to coalesce around their nominee, which is, it's more than disappointing to me. It's heartbreaking. Some people who are extremely important to me that I would have called decent Republicans, moderate Republicans, are jumping on. It just kills me. I thought they would stand firm and just say, this man's not qualified. He's disqualified and unqualified. And so it's sort of settling now into something that I guess is a little more conventional. But this party over principle that's been defeating. That's been sad for me to see. Good people who know better, who know that he's not qualified, who know that he's dangerous.
There's a lot going on that's above principle here, not just party over principle. It's personal career. Like he's a career politician. Power over principle. Appearance over principle. Shallowness over depth. To me, it's obvious, and I think what you're saying too with these people that haven't come out and distanced themselves from Trump, it's a lack of integrity.
I try to couch it in some other terms, but I can't, Cass.
I'm not going to.
Right? That's what it comes down to. So I hate saying it, but it's what it is. And regardless of the outcome of the election, I think we're going to have years of recovering from this Trump syndrome. I think the negativity, I think that the hostility and the aggression and the ugliness of it all is going to be, we're going to be feeling the effects of that for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are starting to speculate now, even if Trump loses, he's going to be a sore loser, and his base is too. And it's who knows how that's going to manifest.
Scary.
Wow. Well, to take a step back into Tennessee, is there any kind of what are people talking about? What do they care about most? What's like the number one issue or that you seem to hear about?
It kind of depends upon which side you're asking. From the Democrats, of course, we have huge concern about education. We have huge concern about Insure Tennessee, for the reasons that we've mentioned, both the fiscal and the humanitarian reasons.
And they don't want to do that Tennessee thing, the healthcare thing, because of Obama.
I believe it's because of Obama. They
Absolutely,
have yet to give a reason why they haven't brought Insure Tennessee to vote. We have to speculate, and because it comes at no cost to the budget, and because our hospitals are crying out for it, we have had hospitals closed. We've lost 7 hospitals in the last 2 years
in the state.
Yes, and we have another 40 plus that are at risk because they're treating uninsured people without any reimbursement, and they have said whatever shortfall the federal government, which we've already paid for, they'll step in and cover that. And so there is no reason not to pass it. There just isn't.
Right.
And so I'd have to say yes, it's a resistance to President Obama.
Yeah,
and Tracy's opposed to Insure Tennessee.
Yes, he's opposed to Insure Tennessee.
That's
right?
something.
I know.
It's not costing you.
Well,
a dime.
you would think you'd have an uproar with the doctors and the hospital CEOs saying, "Look, you're going to leave us high and dry."
They have. I mean, this is the position of the American hospitals. The Tennessee Hospital Associations is yes. This is putting us at risk. It's and then that affects. It's such a cascade because you lose the jobs associated with that closed hospital, and then any first year insurance agent knows when you have a deficit like that, what happens to everybody else's insurance rates? They all increase. That's the game. That's how it's played, and so we get hit 3 or 4 times on this, plus the humanitarian effect.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right? It leaves everybody just speechless.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. People just aren't interested, or they just think Democrats
No. The majority of the residents of the entire state of Tennessee are in favor of this. 60 plus. It's got a huge bipartisan support among the citizens. It's the legislature that won't bring it in.
What's the difference in I mean, this is where I'm ignorant, but there was a thing called TennCare. What's the difference in that and Insure Tennessee?
It's, I don't know the particulars of it. I know
was
that
Sure,
it was before
Obamacare,
and it was for very, very poor folks. Right?
It's very poor folks, and it's very particular about who qualifies for it. It's women with certain kind of female diseases. It's young children.
My impression is that it failed and that it cost almost bankrupted the state or something. This is like from my Republican friends said that TennCare was a disaster, and so if there's anybody that's kind of associating that, if it was in fact a disaster, with Insure Tennessee, then there might be some.
Well, and of course that is the whole marketing, is that we have such when we
socialized medicine or
when
whatever.
we were talking about Trump earlier, you talked about the shallowness versus the depth. It's also facts versus emotionalism, and this is, as I said, the thing that I repeatedly try to do to my folks is to have them research. The problem is you're encouraging these folks to research, and all of us know what a hot mess the internet is and what you can Google, and so it's not a simple skill anymore. You have to be selective about. You have to be careful of what your sources are, and this is in addition to, these are working people. These are working people who are struggling because our working wage is so low. They struggle with making ends meet. They've got their children in schools and they're trying to help the schools, and then here am I saying, oh well, you need to research it, and then you need to be careful about who you. So it's a negative cycle, and they presume. And this is the poignant part. This is the sad part. They presume their leaders have their best interests at heart. Well, so when Tracy says to them, "Oh, Insure Tennessee is going to bankrupt the state, and we're going to lose all the," they go, "Oh, well, then we probably shouldn't. We need to keep you in office so that you can continue to protect us." And that's a sad thing, because I think they're preying on our folks' vulnerabilities. It's
fatigue. I think it's a big deal for the general population. Is overwhelmed by the mountain of information. When you say research, when you say looking at, and it's so ironic. Again, we're going back to like anti-big government, and yet those same type leaders are saying, "Trust me, I'll think for you."
Yeah.
And
facts is for suckers.
Well, I listened to this. I heard a Republican strategist this morning on the news, and he said, well, facts are subjective. I mean, literally, those are the words he said. You could Google this for yourself. He said,
facts are subjective, huh?
Are subjective. And I thought that's the problem, is that
interpretation of the facts are
interpretation is certainly subjective.
But by definition, that's what subjective means.
Yeah, you can pour a pile of facts on the middle of the floor there, and CNN will tell you what those facts mean, and Fox will tell you, and there'll be two different things.
And,
those will be subjective, but the facts themselves are not.
No,
they're not.
No.
They're objective.
Right.
Well, yeah, you'd like to think, absolutely. Yeah.
But
wow. Well, so how do you get $750,000, and how do you become competitive with this guy? You're a great candidate. Let's get out there and
Bob, I cannot tell you. Words don't exist for me to express my gratitude and appreciation for the folks that have supported me, because they believe in who I am. They believe in what we stand for, and these are working folks. The very nature of running as a Democrat means that we don't usually have big business in our pocket, and we usually don't have the ability to reach out to that, to those vast resources to be able to. And so it has been $25 and $50 and $100, and every donation has meant something. So we have streamlined the campaign. We're so strategic about our costs. We continue to stay flexible and light on our feet on where we feel like we can best use our dollar. It's the way I've always done my own personal family budget. Every dollar is finite. You can only spend this dollar in one place, and how can we spend this dollar to get the message out more effectively to people? So
we've got these Democrats in Washington, this Democratic National Committee and stuff, and they won't give you any money because there's no percentage in it for them. I mean, you're going to lose, and they know it. So why pour $700,000 into you?
Absolutely.
When you're going
to, I understand.
We can use that money elsewhere.
I understand that strategy.
That pisses me off.
It does me too. It does me too. But here's what it does. It does not absolve me of my responsibility to continue to run, and it won't absolve the person in 2 years, and it won't absolve the person 2 years after that. As I said, just because something is hard, just because it's an uphill climb, just because you're a little tiny blue boat in a sea of red, that doesn't mean you don't do that. It has to do as much with, and I talked about getting the message out and starting the conversation, but it also has to do with flattening the grass for the people that come behind us. He hasn't even had an opponent. And so at least now, he may step over my cold, dead body on the way in. But he's going to have answered to some of this. If we can get even a few voters to start asking questions and start looking at his voting record and saying, he keeps talking about how he is in favor of strong schools, but every vote he takes undermines public school. Where's the cognitive dissonance here? One thing or the other is not right. So I think the objective facts, his voting record speaks for itself. He doesn't support that.
Have you got people making phone calls?
I do. We have phone banking.
Where does that take place here in Rutherford?
We have Democratic headquarters here in Rutherford County.
On the square?
It's on Burton Street, which is right off the square. We have that on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8.
Wait a second. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 8. Anybody can come.
Anybody can come.
And when they come, you're going to give them a phone and a list of phone numbers.
We give them a phone
numbers. And these are already Democrats.
Yes, these are
friendly calls.
These are soft, squishy middle folks. So they're not hard. They're not necessarily hard D's, and they're not hard R's.
They're
this
purple.
is the soft, squishy middle, the purple.
Yeah, right.
They have a script. They have a series of phone numbers, and it's a fun time, and we all carry on, and everybody's talking over everybody else. It's festive. We do pizza. It's a good time.
I used to make cold calls for the firefighters, raising money for the firefighters.
Sure.
And I say cold calls. They're actually people who have given before. So it was those were warm calls, I guess.
Yeah. Tepid.
And so you get hung up on every now and then. But you just it's water off your back. You don't take it personal. You just go into the next call. But it is fun. So I know that our listeners are all the way from Australia to,
and this can also be done remotely. You don't have to, join me at headquarters to do it. I can email a call list to you and the script to you. And sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you can do that for an hour or so in the evenings. And
from home.
From home. Awesome.
That's amazing.
Isn't that cool?
And when you're talking to them, you're basically hoping that if they're on the fringe of not even going out to vote, maybe you encourage them to do that.
Oh, of course. Of course. We start at the top about, encouraging them to register to vote, encouraging them to get out to vote, asking them if they have any questions about the upcoming election, and then kind of working into, well, this is our position on some things. Do you have any questions? We are extremely available. I put my personal cell phone number out on every single call. You call me if you have a question about it. I've been taken up on it a couple of times.
Wow.
That's awesome.
People have called me back.
How many politicians give their personal cell phone out?
It's part of who I am and what I'm trying to do. You want to be accessible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you're unafraid of any phone call. That's what I love about you.
Cass, unafraid, period.
The whole thing about running, I recognize the privilege it is to be able to run for office. Not everybody's in a position where their job and their family life and everything is helpful to be able to run for office. And it is a position of privilege. And I have been so humbled and so grateful to get to do it. But yes, when you say that unafraid, what are they going to do to me? Be ugly about me? Say ugly things about, I don't know, my clothes or my kids or whatever. Bring it.
Or just a policy that you just,
sure,
whatever. You're not.
But this is good. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about our differences. Let's talk about why I hold this belief. Let's talk about the facts that I can back up the reason that I have this position.
You know what's kind of sad is that I know this about you because you and I have had this exchange before, and that is you're a skeptic. I mean, we call ourselves, it's one of the words we call ourselves, atheist, agnostic, free thinker, skeptic, bright. What you were saying a moment ago where you're talking about how wishing and hoping that the public would educate themselves, and part of what I could hear you saying, if it was something we could be out and proud about as a campaign, is that vote for the skeptic party or the skeptic candidate. And where's your skepticism, in a candidate like Trump or whatever? It's like just encouraging people to be skeptic as if in Tennessee in 2016 that's a good thing.
Right. There's a little bit of my a little soundbitey kind of a thing that I do when I talk to voters. If in the conversation, whether it's about religion or any other topics, and they ask me about how I would govern and how I would make decisions, I have a little thing that I say, and I say I ask myself just the way I taught my children to, and the way I make decisions as an adult. Yes, I ask myself 3 questions. Is it rational? Is it reasonable? And is it right? And let me break that down a little bit. Is it rational means, does this legislation solve an identified problem? Is it effective? Does it solve a problem in an effective way? The second question, is it reasonable? That's the money shot. Is that, once again, $1 can only be spent one time. Is it reasonable to take the money that our citizens have given in order to govern and use it for this legislation? And then the third one, is it right? Does this have the most positive effect on the largest number of people and the least negative effect on the least number of people? If you put any piece of legislation through that 3-question test, anything from the last couple of years, transgender bathrooms and that gun for the state gun and the skunks as pets and all of this that we have done, they don't even get past the first question. Is this a reasonable, is this a reasonable piece of legislation? So that's going along with what you're saying about being a skeptic. I have tried to bill myself as the reasonable candidate. What is reasonable? Let's talk about Insure Tennessee. What is reasonable about this? If it comes at 0 cost, if the hospitals are in favor of it, if the majority of the citizens are in favor of it, it's reasonable for us to at least bring this to a vote, get this out there, get these folks the insurance that they need to have their diseases treated. That's the reasonable position.
And it's right. Yeah. Clearly it's right.
And rational.
And rational.
But I'm just going to say it so you don't have to. But in this state and in this Christian hegemonic area, the reasonable muscle of most of Tennesseans' brains is atrophied. I'm just going to say it. All right. So you didn't say it? I did.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that.
Did you read about this shooting in Tennessee where the guy was an employee, was in some kind of business or company meeting, got offended, went out to his car, got a gun, walked back in and killed 2 people and then turned it on himself? This was just yesterday, I think.
I had not heard that.
Well, and what we were at, Dave Mathis, who supports you also, and he and I were talking about that last night, and there's a law in Tennessee that says you can bring your gun to work that was recently passed. And
you can also bring your gun to parks, and you can bring your gun to bars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so even though he didn't have it in the building, he had it in his car. And we were wondering is if he had it at home and he had to actually drive home to get it, that's a time even for a dumbass to take a few breaths.
Right.
And he might have not gone back in. He might have got in touch with some rationale and some reason and some logic and skepticism in that time frame.
Yeah, yeah.
Because crime's a passion, right? I mean, I think when you were starting the 3 R's and you were saying rational, one of the things is like, how much is this bill or this, that we're looking at is emotionally driven?
Sure.
And obviously that was a crime of passion, and he might have calmed down it. And so anyway, I don't know. That's just that's a Tennessee issue. Is guns at work, guns in bars.
Yeah. So here comes the election. The election is over. The state usually goes 60-40 all the time. It seems like
talking presidential.
Well, presidential and just about everything else.
Yeah,
it's just that's just the way it is. Are you going to try again? Are you? I know it's too early to say try again. I'm doing it now. But are you going to be every time somebody does something stupid, which is frequent in the state house? Are you going to stand up and say, "Wait a minute"? that's wrong, and let me tell you why.
Absolutely,
or
absolutely.
So,
and I think we all have that responsibility, Bob. I think that I haven't ruled out I have no idea what the future will hold after the election. I haven't ruled out any possibility. That's kind of the way I live my life. But all of us need to do that. And even having run this cycle, I've learned even more about the importance of being politically active. Whether I run again or not, I'll always support. And I hate to make the division among party lines, and I like to say I wouldn't do that. Whichever candidate has the good ideas, it just seems to be there seems to be more of that on this one side than the other. But whoever has the good ideas, to be part of a campaign, whether that means my financial commitment, volunteering for them, doing the phone banking, all that, we all need to be more politically active. I know that when you get of age to be able to vote in your first election in those early years, it just takes a while to engage. It takes a while to grow up. It takes a while to understand the importance of that. But that's one thing that I want to do, is impress upon our young people with MTSU here in our town, impress upon them, when that clock ticks and you're old enough and you get to participate in this. And I know it's derpy and cliche to say that, but it is it's the process. It's what we have. So we can rail against the way it should be, or we can participate in how it is and work toward what it should be, and that's the avenue I've chosen to do.
I'm sorry, but I see everything through the lens of religion, and I just heard what you just said as we could do things the way we wish they should be or could be, or we could deal with reality.
exactly.
I'm telling you, man,
it's a novel idea.
You're asking Tennesseans to use their non-theistic brains, and they're wired differently.
Maybe it's just going to take this generation to just die off or something.
Well, let me share another story with you that's disheartening, but it's revealing. It's important. I was at one of the lower counties. District 14 is Marshall, Moore, Bedford, Lincoln, and then the eastern half of Rutherford. And I was in one of the lower counties at the county fair. Spent the week out at the county fair, meeting people, shaking hands, handing out my
Working
card.
the room.
Working the room.
Sure.
Of course, the Democrats' table is a small booth in the exhibitors building, and the Republicans had the big corner, and they had their "This is Trump Country" banner across and whatever. And the two gentlemen who
just threw up in my mouth.
I know, right?
That's right.
The two gentlemen who were manning that booth, I walked past, and they were talking to two different families that were standing there, and they had their pocket copies of the Constitution, and they were saying, if Hillary Clinton, and I heard this with my own ears, or I wouldn't have believed it. So if Hillary Clinton gets elected, she's going to drop her last name and become Hillary Rodham, and Bill Clinton is going to become Bill Rodham, and then he's going to be able to do 2 more terms because she's going to die, and they're going to appoint him. And a full tinfoil hat. Full on tinfoil hat.
Oh my gosh!
Now I'm stunned. And here's the thing: here are these voters taking their kids to the county fair, trusting their leaders, and the leaders of that party are standing there saying that. And then, on top of this whole tinfoil hat thing about the thing, it goes right into Antichrist and rapture and mark of the beast seamlessly, flawlessly. And so,
my gosh.
And these folks are trusting their leadership. They, you must know more than I do because, wow, I don't know about this. So when we say that Tennesseans have turned off their rational brain and their rational thinking, it is because they're trusting their leadership, and it makes me angry all over again that this is happening at this level. That and because we keep our folks down. Do you know that the governor not long ago said that Tennessee was going to be a destination state for low wage workers? As if that's a thing that we want. We know we have the facts and the evidence to say that the one most important thing to break out of a cycle of poverty is education. And yet here we have our state government undermining public education by selling it off to private, to the charter schools, undermining that. And then we have the leadership who, I don't know if these men believe that, or if they were or if they had been told that. Whatever it is rotten from the top. It's just rotten from to the core, and it's doing such a disservice to the people.
Yeah, apparently these people don't understand how the Constitution works either, because they're saying things like, if Hillary Clinton is
change your name. As if we won't know that it's still him.
Yeah, right.
He's hiding behind a last name.
But they go for the Second Amendment thing, and they say, well, she's going to, kill the Second Amendment.
Destroy the Second Amendment. Take it away, whatever they're saying.
And it's like, no.
That's not how it
that's
works.
not possible. That it takes 2/3 of the state to change that, and that's not going to happen.
Right.
you just, after a while, you just throw up your hands.
And it's sad because that is what on the other side it has devolved into. This kind of you start with a kernel of truth or a kernel of fact, and then you just go with that
to
anything
subjective.
that suits your narrative. And as I said, they're taking advantage of the fact that working families, working people don't have the time to invest in. Oh my gosh, I've got to study constitutional history. I've got to study. What did they mean by the Second Amendment? They don't have time for. Ain't nobody got time for that.
That's right.
We're doing our jobs, doing our kids, trying the best we can to put food on the table. And so it's just rotten to the core.
Well, maybe we could be crazy too then. Take a little fact and just bend it and. Is that possible?
Except for that tiny little thing of ethics. I've often thought the same thing about, we in this room, we're not religious people, but if I were a lawyer, and I am, I think I could make a better case that the principles of Jesus, the way Jesus is being followed by modern Christianity, is more closely aligned with democratic principles than with Republican principles. Loving your neighbor, not accumulating material wealth, helping people when they need help, feeding people who are hungry, helping the poor. Everything is more closely aligned. If you look at the platforms of the two parties, it's much more closely aligned there. But Democrats know that's not a good association to make. We have separation of church and state for a reason, and so unfortunately our ethics keep us from going, no, this is this is what Jesus would want you to do. This is how Jesus would want you to vote. When you could make a case for that, but we've chosen not to do that. So there we go.
Well, you used to be a Christian. You know how they spin that, right? That they don't want the government behaving like Jesus. They want charity, so like instead of the government doing things that are Christ-like, they want to do the things that are Christ-like, and so they're they
that won't happen.
Except that narrative is disrupted when they take actions like we're going to have these bathroom monitors because that is the government stepping in doing whatever it is that it's doing.
That's the government acting like Yahweh, not
right?
The Old Testament God,
right?
Or Paul. Any homophobic God you want to put in the boilerplate there. Well, before we go on, I want to just ask one more question about charter schools. You've mentioned it a few times. What is I don't understand. Are we looking at Tennessee becoming a school that endorses or literally financially supports charter schools with tax money? Or
Right. So indications are that the legislature, as it is now, the Republicans in the legislature now, in order to be a charter school and you hang out your shingle that says this is Cass's school, and you open your school and you say, here's an alternative to that, the money that comes out of the state budget for that goes into your private school. The guidelines are nowhere near the same as for public school. In other words, if you change your motive for having a school from educating children to profit, what happens? What happens to your guidelines? What happens to your criteria? What happens to the children? You're not under the same qualifications. Teachers are under, and Bob knows this because of Edie, teachers are under such attack in this state because the ability to retain their jobs from year to year has to do with two things. One is how their students perform in their testing, and we all agree that students are over-tested here. It adds to their anxiety, it adds to their stress. So some students spend as much as 30 days a year in testing and testing prep. So that's 30 days that's taken out of the instructional part of the classroom and put into testing and testing prep. So it creates a tremendous amount of stress. The second thing that teachers are adjudged on is this assessment, this 70-point assessment that in two 30-minute sessions over the course of the year, an administrator comes in and a checklist, as a checklist. Yeah, Mindy's, yeah. If even qualified, experienced, effective teachers can't make the 4s and the 5s that are necessary consistently to be able to even keep their jobs from year to year, so they have their job security is always unstable. They can lose tenure, which is an idea that's, the concept of that is just bizarre. They haven't had a meaningful raise in years. They haven't had a meaningful raise. And then when money does go into education, it goes into this awful failed testing like we had this last year. So there are so many things that are that are inherently against teachers. And then when you bring in charter schools, and the charter schools don't have to follow those qualifications.
Right.
It's a
But they're still getting money from the state.
Yes.
But why
Yes.
why can't we say there are certain things that you cannot make that's not profit driven or whatever?
Wouldn't you think that public school might be one of those
public
things?
schools, you probably should have roads that are probably paid for. The Commonwealth pays for that.
Right.
And health care. I
And
mean,
they
why
want-
would you want to have a,
And they want to they want the opposite. The Republicans want the opposite. They want to privatize everything. There's dollars to be had in capitalism, and there's dollars to be had in all of this. And I believe that there are places that maybe we can privatize something. I'm open to it. I'm not saying it's off the table, but you're right. The very bottom foundation, the public schools, roads, healthcare, all those things. Let's leave that
Police,
off
fire,
the table
yeah.
for profit motive.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't, because they say, well, there'll be a death panel. There are death panels. They're at the insurance company. They say, no, I'm not going to cover that. No, you're going to.
That's as good as
you're going to pretty much fucking die.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Well,
Right.
and we've seen the privatized prisons, and
That doesn't work at
right.
all.
well,
Right, that's another
you have
area.
a profit motive.
Yeah,
to
let's
get more
fill
people
those-
in there. Yeah,
That's right. Fill those things up.
it's a mess. But
Yeah.
see, this is, I guess, where I come to is it is a mess. But instead of taking the path of least resistance and being a coward, Gayle is jumping in there and trying to do something
Standing
about
up.
it. And I think the fact that we're even admitting that her chances are slim, and she said, "Fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway."
Right.
I said, "Fuck it."
That's right. She wouldn't say that. No, but that's right. That's right. It does.
Wait, I probably have to take that out. Okay. If we want to make this a campaign-friendly show.
Well, it's been such a privilege and a pleasure to be able to run, to be able to talk to the folks. And like I said, it is all of the cliche things about running. Is when people entrust their vote to you. It's the most humbling experience I think I've had is to have them tell me what they feel like their needs are, and then to give me the confidence of their vote. Has just been
To go represent 'em.
unbelievable. Thank you. Yeah,
Wow.
that's
I
what
love
I want
it.
to do.
Well,
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you
Gayle.
for having me. It's always so much fun.
So we can send everybody to Gayle Jordan for Senate14.com, and we'll repeat that again at the
Absolutely.
intro and outro.
Thank you for having me.
oh, that was great.
Thank you. So that's our talk with Gayle Jordan about her candidacy for Tennessee State Senate. Up next is our talk with Nina Jackel of ladyfreethinker.org. Bob and I offer our post-commentary at the end of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, Nina. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for asking me.
Sure.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I mean, it's a great thing.
Well, it sounded like you were listening to us when we first called you.
Yeah, I was.
Getting a feel for these guys before you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely. So where you calling from, or where are you now, Nina?
I'm in Los Angeles, on the west side. It's a beautiful sunny day here.
Ooh, the west side of LA is nice too.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And you have a, is it a blog? Yeah, it's a blog.
It started as one, and now it's really expanded to a news and action website, Progressive News and Action, focusing on human rights, animal rights, environmental protection, some religious topics. Originally I actually started out as an agnostic blog, and then expanded to all the issues that I thought mattered a lot more than talking about God, so or more than religion in general. So it's evolved to be a little bit more than that now.
So we'll repeat it at the end, but that's ladyfreethinker.org.
That's right.
And that's all you, or do you have other writers, or?
Oh, I have some wonderful writers that I work with, and I still write and I edit every single article. I assign topics, but I'm the main force behind it. But my writers are amazing. And
Well, so the fact that you're an atheist is not the big deal. It's all these are activism. These are issues that you're addressing from just purely a human perspective, and you're not attacking religion. It doesn't look like it's just in a way. This is great because so often atheisms aren't. We're not known for being social justice activists or
I bet you there's a lot of them though.
There are.
And originally, it was really going to focus on agnosticism. But along the way, I sort of realized that, I can talk about that, and it's a very important subject, but then what replaces that, and I believe that what ultimately replaces, the lack of religion is, another purpose, and the purpose of doing good things and helping people and helping animals and helping the planet. So that is the main focus. And I also have readers who are religious, and so it's hard for me, sometimes, and some of them will say, thank God that somebody helped this person or helped this animal. You don't want to say, oh, well, you're an idiot for saying that, because,
Exactly.
Because they're compassionate people and they're not bad. I don't, agree with them. I think if they really, gave their beliefs some, deep thought, they might, end up agnostic or atheist themselves.
Sure.
But to me, I think it's more important to actually do those good things than to argue with them about what their religious beliefs are. So it does focus mainly on that.
Yeah, Nina, do you have a sort of a theological background? I mean, did you go to church when you were a kid, and did you grow up in religion?
Well, I grew up with religious traditions, but I wouldn't say faith. We went to Reform temple, Jewish temple, and then my mother was Episcopalian, so we would actually go to Episcopal church on Easter and Christmas. At the same time we were going to Saturday school and Hebrew school. So yeah, I did grow up with religion. Thankfully, the faith aspect wasn't forced down my throat. I think it had more to do with, maybe you could say, Jewish guilt.
Sure.
Half of they felt like, you just have to go to temple. It's just something you have to do to be like, my dad's a good Jew from the Bronx. And, it's just kind of something that he did and he still does. And that, there's nothing wrong with that. And he understands, that most of my family is not religious and he's not terribly religious himself. But, But yeah, those rituals, those traditions were there, more than anything else.
Yeah. So where did all that take place? Like, where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in the Bronx in New York. Okay. But then we moved to California when I was 9, and we lived in Riverside in the Inland Empire. And so most of that took place, that's, in Riverside, that's where I had my bat mitzvah and stuff like that.
Where you had what?
Bat mitzvah. That's the...
Oh, yeah, bat mitzvah. Okay.
Yeah, I did have a bat mitzvah, and, my sister didn't. She didn't want to, and my family was fine with that. And, I did, not so much because I was religious, but just because it was, kind of a thing to do that would...
It's a party, man. Yeah, why not? Right,
you get all these presents, and
yeah,
and you get a check from your grandma, and so...
Well, there was a phase of my Christianity, and this was inspired by Hunter McFarlane, my Christian friend that we've talked about before on the show, but he has adopted... there's a lot of Christians that kind of consider themselves adopted Jews.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And they practice a lot of the festivals and the calendar. They'll do a Seder meal at Christmas or whatever. And they'll... but one thing that he did for his children, and he wrote a book on it as an evangelical, kind of co-opting this practice, that his critique, and he's not alone in this, is that in the American mainstream society, we do not have a rite of passage that helps demark adulthood. And so his metaphor is, hey, look, when your marriage is struggling, I mean, part of what the ceremony did was it stamped a date and time where you looked each other in the eye and you said, till death do us part. You made a vow, and so instead of just, hey, we started shacking up and then we've just stayed in that place.
Yeah.
The intent, I think, or part of the benefit of the ritual is stamping it as something official. And so what his point is that adolescents and puberty and children and the confusion of who am I and who have I come here to be and am I an adult or am I a child, and all those question marks.
Right.
Well, the rite of passage of bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah stamps a day and time where you're now an adult. And even though it's much more ambiguous than that and complicated than that, at least ceremonially,
it's
that,
there.
And
Exactly.
and people, I mean, the thing about a wedding, like I just got through meeting with a couple that I'm going to marry next month, and they've been living together, But there's when the aunts and uncles and grandparents fly in from out of town and sit down and witness this event, I mean, it gives it some credibility. It gives it some substance, and then when and if you're trying to get out of that marriage, it's a little harder to break the glue. It's a little harder to. Anyway, so just the virtue of rites of passage. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. And in my first marriage, it was there really wasn't a ceremony. I didn't even tell my family until a month later, which is another story in and of itself. And I tell you, that divorce was not that difficult.
Yeah.
Now I had a real marriage, and it does carry a lot of weight, not just because of the ceremony aspect, but I do understand what you're saying.
It's more accountable. That's all.
Yeah, I suppose
Yeah,
so.
it is. And, there is something to be said for, ceremony. And
Sure.
It's fortunate that so many ceremonies, virtually all ceremonies, in our lives are based on faith, taking faith out of it and focusing on the true meaning of the ritual is a great thing, So, yeah.
So ladyfreethinker.org, one thing that we skimmed over that I think is worth saying is that when you're anti-theist or you're against religion or you're pushing back against theocracy or Christian hegemony, then that's an anti-thing. We're coming out for what we're against. And you've also turned and faced causes and issues and said, this is what we're for. And so you've channeled your energy into being for something. And like all those issues that you mentioned, and I don't know. I mean, how much of feminism is a part of it? Since lady's in the title.
Yeah, lady is in the title. Feminist is a part of it. I'm definitely a feminist, but it's not the main focus either. It's almost post-feminist in a way that, the philosophy is that. Everybody does matter. And I don't have to say, because you're a woman, you matter, because you're African American, you matter, because you're this, you matter, or because you're an animal, you matter. It's a very animal rights oriented blog also. So I don't hit people over the head with that because I just don't think that's how you necessarily, I guess, accomplish things in the way that I want to accomplish them, because I would rather focus on the action portion than the complaining portion.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Well, in many ways, I know my life was shaped by a conversation I had with my father on his deathbed when I was 17 and he was 58. And he died of cancer, and I was just sitting there on his bed, and he knew I was a super zealous religious Christian at the time. I was much more than he ever was.
Wow.
And but he didn't say go out and save the lost or go out and make disciples like Jesus' great commission. His commission to me was make the world a better place. And what's cool is that when I deconverted from Christianity, his commission still applies to my life. It survived the deconversion of faith. And yet making the world a better place is still a noble cause for an atheist. And I see in your blog and in the stuff that you're doing, and I know I can be a bit nihilistic at times, and I embrace that as far as the meaninglessness of life or whatever, and I realize that without extant meaning, that any meaning I give it is just me giving it. And when I say it can be, it's like, well, fuck the world, it's all going to hell in a handbasket or whatever, you can get real apathetic. But what I read in your, in the about section of your ladyfreethinker.org's website was, it was pretty idealistic. It was like, if we will, through education and compassion, I don't remember if that word was in there, but like you're prescribing ways to actually save the world, or at least turn the Titanic from this self-destruction, self-sabotage that we are doing both ecologically and murder and sex trafficking or all the shit that we do that is just self-destructive, you're really working towards, turning that around. So I guess my question, if I were to put it in a formal question, would be, what do you want to accomplish by establishing ladyfreethinker.org? What do you want from your readers? What do you hope to accomplish?
I think you said it. You said change the world, and that does sound idealistic and maybe even naive, but that is what I want to do with the blog. Change the world one step at a time, one issue at a time, one person, one animal, one piece of plastic that doesn't get thrown into the ocean, and it's a big thing, but it's not a big thing when you break it down, and I think it comes from realizing that your everyday actions actually do make a difference. And I think the biggest problem I actually have with religion is that it takes away that personal responsibility. Yep. If you think that there's a God out there that is just gonna make everything okay, if you go confess your sins, or, that's an extreme. The Catholic confession is an extreme of the absolving of the sins. But even if not that extreme, just the thought that, if you follow this sort of path that's been prescribed, these vague amendments and, this book that was written thousands of years ago that you don't really understand, or at least you follow what people tell you about it, then everything's just going to be fine. I think that's incredibly destructive, and that's the biggest problem I have. So, I guess my goal is to be sort of the opposite of that, in that, I'm saying, what you do matters. And, yes, a lot of things are shitty. We're destroying the planet. People are suffering. Horrible things are happening in the world. But the things that you do every single day and do, not just can, but they actually do matter. And if you do nothing, things aren't going to get better. And, you get one life. Why not do that with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of makes sense. Well, did you go to school out in L.A. then, Nina?
Well, I went to journalism school at UCLA, but I actually got my undergrad philosophy degree in Denver. I went to the University of Colorado at Denver. I lived out there for about 8 years.
Cool. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
So, yeah, you're right, and I want to highlight a couple of things you just said. One, and this is why God is so problematic, I think. The notion of God, the concept of God, because two things are going on when you let go and let God, or when He's got the whole world in His hands. There's two things going on. One, you can say He's in control, He loves us, He's going to do the right thing, He's going to take care of it.
Yeah, right.
There's that. So the positive trust and faith and blind trust of God fixing this, and it's really too big for me to do anything, right, sure. And so I give it to God in a good way. That's a benevolent person saying God's going to take care of this. The flip side of that is that same God, at least the God of the Bible, has expressed intent to destroy it.
Right.
And that the prophecies is that He's going to throw away this planet like an old garment, is what the Bible says, and that He's going to bring a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem and all this stuff, all this prophecy that's vague as fuck. It's a mushroom trip that John went on in Revelation, and so we look to that and we go, okay, He's either going to save it because He wants to extend it, or He's going to destroy it because it's apocalypse time, and it's His choice. Either way, I'm off the hook.
Right.
It's not I can't do this. And you do think about all the plastic that's produced and thrown in the trash every day and ends up in the ocean. Or you think about everything that gets poured down the drain of your, how much water reproduction we have to do and purification. How much fossil fuels. I mean, in order to stop true fossil fuel fuck up of the earth, every car and every engine and every motor of all industry would have to stop today, which would cause more chaos than that it's going to cost by letting it go. And so that's why we throw up our hands, we give it to God or whatever. Yeah. But what I love about what you said, and I'm going to ask that you prescribe some things for me and my listeners and Bob here, and that is break it down, because we do look at it all from a 30,000 foot view and we feel helpless.
Right.
Little old me, there's nothing I can do to curb this trend. So you've got some ways that we can daily in our daily lives make a difference. What are those?
Well, this isn't going to be popular, but I would say one thing you can do is not eat meat, because the largest scale suffering caused in our country today happens to animals on factory farms. I don't know if you've watched any of the undercover videos, but it's horribly cruel. It's just manufactured torture that happens to 9 billion animals a year. So that's one thing that I think, and it's not just for the animals, it's actually for the environment. Massive amounts of waste, of greenhouse gases, there's a toxic sludge of manure coming from these factory farms. I mean,
and how much water they consume.
Yeah, water,
exactly.
Food.
The pesticides used to grow the crops, half of the crops grown in our country don't go to feed humans, they go to feed the livestock. And I mean, think of how many pesticides that is, and the water usage. And it's just, I would say it's the single most destructive industry that we have. So I would say that's the first thing. That's, people really balk when you say that, because most people don't want to do that. But it's just, even if you're not perfect, it's not about being perfect. It's just about, making one choice. There's so many really good veggie burgers and veggie chicken and all of these delicious things.
Yeah, everything.
Vegan's even better. Because
I've got a daughter who's vegan.
They're cruel too. But, and I'm vegan, not perfect, but mainly vegan.
Me saying I have a daughter who's vegan, I immediately thought it sounded like I was saying I have a black friend.
I know a few vegans. Yeah, exactly.
Some vegans. Well, that's great. Just go next time you go to the restaurant. Just, you don't have to get a salad. You don't have to eat rabbit food. Just get a veggie burger. Yeah. They're really, really good, actually.
Yeah. Well, you don't sound like a Nazi about it. You don't sound like you're militant about it. Like, it's not. Nobody's going to be perfect, but just skip one meal. Like, just do it one day at a time and wean yourself of this addiction to meat or something. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have listeners that are going to applaud. Bob and I have a friend, Sharon and Blake, and they listen to the show, so a little shout out to them. But this is the top of the list for them as far as the cause or the issue that they really want to, bully pulpit or whatever.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
So that's one.
So that's one. Well, you're asking me how to save the world. I'm kind of
okay, go for it.
Hey, you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's going to be. And honestly, we typically, the premise of our show is talking to people with religious deconversion stories. You don't have one, so really, we're just going to focus on your work.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I think so many, atheists, and I have a lot of atheist friends, too, especially in the animal rights world, which is interesting. They kind of seem to go hand in hand. But, I know a lot of people who are very resentful because they were raised in extremely oppressive religious environments. And I'm sure you understand that.
Well, yeah, and it's not only just oppressive, but it's really hard to break out of. And when you do, it turns your world upside down, and you lose friendships and family. People won't talk to you anymore. Internally, the world has been turned upside down, and so how now shall I live? What's the meaning of life? You have to start over, burning new neural pathways. I mean, it's just really traumatic.
Yeah.
No, I believe that, and I consider myself extremely lucky that I wasn't raised in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
But I also think that, my perspective is a little bit different than those people because I don't have that, that deep emotional.
Yeah, you don't have that energy around it. Yeah.
So I'm not angry about it. In some ways I am. When I see the injustices caused by religion, I do get angry, I have to say. Yeah. But I don't have, I'm not really bitter because I haven't experienced it personally. So it is definitely a different perspective than a lot of, atheists I know.
Well, and you're not in a Christian hegemonic environment in L.A.
No, definitely
yeah,
not.
I mean, you look over here at these flyover states where we're at, and you scratch your head, I'm sure.
I don't know how long I would last in some areas.
It would drive you crazy, I'm sure. Yeah.
So is this what you do for a living, or what do you do for a living?
No, I'm actually a campaign director for Last Chance for Animals. It's a nonprofit animal rights organization. So that's what I do full time. And I had Lady Freethinker before I started working there. It's something I've been doing for, I guess, maybe 4 years now, something like that, 3 or 4 years. and it's something that is almost full time for me. So I almost have 2 full-time jobs.
Yeah,
But
right. I understand.
During the day, it's all about about the animal rights issues, and then I go home and pretty much until I go to sleep, I'm working on Lady Freethinker, editing and assigning.
And you're married?
I am married. Yes, I just had my 1-year anniversary.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Any children?
Not yet.
Okay. I bet you have pets, though, being how, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Well, we have 2 rescue cats, and one was mine, and then one was his, and we kind of moved in together, and now, now they're sisters, and they get along as best they can.
Right.
Poor cat.
Cool. What do you do for fun? What do you do for recreation?
Oh God, recreation. What's that?
That's right.
I like to play video games. I'm addicted to RPGs. So
What's RPG?
Role-playing games.
Oh yeah, role-playing games. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I love playing the Zelda games, especially. And then lately I've been playing a lot of like the super old school like NES RPGs, Earthbound, Breath of Fire, things I'm sure you've never heard of, and you'd have to be a little geek to even know what they are. I mean,
so it's this kind of thing where you have an avatar?
Well, you play the main character, like in Zelda, for example.
Okay, I see.
You play the character Link.
Yeah.
And I strongly feel, by the way, that should have been a female character. It actually really annoys me because The Legend of Zelda, Zelda, of course, is female. She's the princess. But then it's like, Link, the boy, saves the princess. And that drives me nuts, especially because Zelda has a lot of female players. It's actually really popular among women for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe for the same reasons that I'm talking about, because it's not, overtly violent. And there's a lot of strategy, a lot of problem solving, puzzles, things like that. And that's what I enjoy. I also enjoy crossword puzzles. That's another thing. Sure. I love puzzles. So there's that puzzle aspect to it.
So what do you do with you and your husband? Do something together? Like, do you go see movies, or do you go see live music or art shows, or?
We go to art shows. My husband is a sculptor, so usually on the weekends we're out at the art openings around Los Angeles.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've never been there. Do you have a car? Do you take a bus everywhere, or what's the transportation?
Well, sadly, Los Angeles has a terrible public transportation system, so you kind of have to drive everywhere, which sucks because if you want to drink, you're kind of SOL. So actually, we've been taking a lot of Ubers lately because these openings usually have free wine. So go and look at art and have a couple drinks, and you can't just go drive home. So yeah, really Uber's the transportation choice of the moment.
Yeah.
So one last question: if there was a person that you could point to that was a major inspiration in you becoming the activist that you are today, who would that be?
I feel like I've kind of evolved, and I can't point to ideologically a specific person, but I will say that my mother started very, very early with social messages. We used to watch Sesame Street, and, I was like 3 or 4 years old. I had loved it. I didn't see any issues. And then she'd be like, there is not one single female puppet, which is absolutely true and absolutely astonishing and really, really fucked up. Not one female, I guess they were Muppets because they were Jim Henson, but not one female puppet on Sesame Street. And, she brought that up. And at the time, I was actually kind of annoyed that she even said that because I love Sesame Street. She was like, who cares? And at the time, I was like, yeah,
yeah, but that's amazing. I mean, we think of Miss Piggy, but that's different. That's not Sesame Street. That's the Muppets.
Right.
The Muppets, they have Miss Piggy, right?
Right.
Like stereotypical, the love interest. I mean, come on, that's lame too. But on Sesame Street, just not one single female puppet at all.
That's amazing. I've never thought of that. And the fact that that's gone on right under our nose all these years without noticing, that's an evidence of patriarchy right there.
Right.
Exactly. And, it took a really long time for that to sink in. When you're a kid, you just don't get why that matters. And, eventually, I guess it did sink in. And she also told me that I could do anything that I wanted to do, like literally anything. And I think that made a tremendous impact.
Sure. That's empowering.
Yeah. So I guess I could thank her more than anybody else for what I do today.
So if people want to contact you, I know there's a contact link on the ladyfreethinker.org, or is there an email you want to give out, or what?
Yeah, Nina at ladyfreethinker.org.
Okay. Nina at ladyfreethinker.org.
That's right, yes. And I love talking to people who are interested in these issues. Anyone who wants to write, I always take submissions for articles. Definitely shoot me an email.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks a lot, Nina, for talking to us.
Yeah, it was terrific.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm so glad. I'm glad you guys contacted me. I'm very happy to be a part of this. I think you guys are doing an amazing thing, and helping people get away from bad religious situations it's so important. It's so important.
So there's our double feature with Gayle Jordan and Nina Jackel.
Right.
Neither of which had a backstory or a religious, deconversion story today. Mm-hmm. Now, we did back on episode 79. Mm-hmm. We got Gayle Jordan. She was a Christian,
right?
Deconverted,
a church lady,
very active. Yeah, and she'd be active. This is the point with Gayle. Is she'd be active? No, you wind her up and set her down. She's going to make changes. In fact, you made a reference during our talk with her, where I think you were referring to, what next? If you don't win, what are you going to do? And you said something like, where there's problems, I'll be there. And I thought of Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, that's right.
Well, maybe it's like Casey says. Fella ain't got a soul of his own, just a little piece of a big soul. The one big soul that belongs to everybody.
Then what, Doc?
Then it don't matter. I'll be all around in the dark. I'll be everywhere. Wherever you can look. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. I'll be in the way guys yell when they're mad. I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when the people are eating the stuff they raise and living in the houses they build, I'll be there too.
I'll be there, yeah. Henry Fonda. Yeah.
So, but in a way, she is that person. I've been around her. I've been on committees with her. I've been on leadership teams with her. We helped plan and run NanoCon, which is the Nashville Nuns Convention, first annual last year, and they're already working on another one this year. I'm not going to be involved with it, but it was I figured out real quick, she is the kind of woman, person, human that she's a getter done. She finds the problems and fixes them. She untangles the spaghetti of the complexity of all these various issues and says, we got to do this, this, and this. You do this. And delegates and thinks. And, I mean, just leadership.
Wow. Well,
she is a really powerful personality.
Yeah. And she's very smart, very articulate.
I could see where Jim Tracy wouldn't want to debate her.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'd put her in a ring with anybody. I mean, even if she wasn't running against him, she's just knowledgeable. She's articulate. She's smart.
Right. Absolutely.
She's the package, man.
Yeah.
And Tennessee doesn't even know what they're passing on if they pass on her.
Well, I was talking to her afterward, and I said, this is kind of like missionary work you're doing here. You're just out in the field trying to just make people think. Just think a little bit.
A little bit at a time.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Absolutely. And sometimes, the losing fight is the best fight to fight. You know what I mean?
Well, especially if you're in the right. Ooh, that rhymed.
Yeah. I mean, and I think she knows what she's up against. Clearly she does.
Oh,
and
well, that's one thing she said.
She's going to fight, And I love that.
She's not naive.
No.
about this.
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
that was clear in her presentation. Mm-hmm. And doing it anyway. And that's where I love that Teddy Roosevelt quote is it's not, I'd rather be out there doing it than in the stands with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.
Right.
I mean,
that's beautiful. Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely.
It's a change agent's mantra.
Yeah,
and she's a change agent.
Yeah,
and
so it was good to have her, and it was good to have Nina Jackel as well, who was on
another change agent.
Yeah,
I think that's what I found. I mean, I didn't plan on putting these two shows together originally, but once they turned out to be about 30, 40 minutes each, and it's two women who are doing what they can. I think what's interesting about doers versus talkers or somebody just wants to sit around and
complain
speculate or complain or dream. Sometimes dreamers are just that and never get off the couch. Both of these women, what do they have right in front of them to do? Well, I know after Gayle's kids grew up, she went and got a law degree. Not necessarily to practice law, but to maybe go into politics and have some credentials for understanding that world.
The legal system and the political
system. And so that's like, what's in front of me to do? And she did it. And now, all right, what's in front of me to do right now? Well, I live in District 14. This guy's been unchallenged for years. Somebody ought to do something. That somebody should be me. They just do what's in front of them to do. In the case of Nina, she's like, I'm a blogger. I mean, I've got the internet is open forum for me to just jump in there and put my 2 cents in and to write and to think and to lobby or whatever she does.
Yeah, she does lobby for for animals and
but
pets.
I guess if there's one thing that is exciting about parading these two women by our listeners, it's like they're motivational, they're inspiring.
Yes,
it's an encouraging message to hear these two women just get off their butts and say, if I want to make change, it's got to be me. And I just was on the porch saying goodbye to Gayle, and she said, I've had so much fun. I've met so many people. It's been humbling. So she loses the election. It's still a net gain for her. And everybody that she's talked to, they're a little bit wiser. They're a little bit stretched. And boy, I could go on and on about how much I think this inability of typically Republicans or whatever, but people, ignorance is on both sides, and this inability to walk a mile in another's shoes, to understand. I think in this age right now where Black Lives Matter and a lot of things are going on, there's protests in Charlotte right now, or is that where it's at? Or,
Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte. And, I put up that meme that showed the Boston Tea Party because a lot of people are saying, well, as soon as your protest involves the destruction of property, you're out of line. Well, tell that to the
Patriots.
Tell that to
them.
Yeah.
Now, anyway, we call them Patriots.
And I think one thing that's going on there that I think is going on in partisan politics is we see them, whether it's pouring tea into the ocean or breaking TVs or stealing TVs out of drugstores or whatever. We see that and we go, that's wrong. Pouring tea into the ocean is wrong. In all cases, because your imagination can't think, why are they pouring tea into the ocean? That's good tea. We could be drinking it or selling it or whatever. We could be selling those TVs. We could be watching those TVs. We could, whatever.
Sure.
A common sense perspective to these types of things says, this is wrong. Well, instead, you need to say, maybe it's right. And in what context could it be right? And then investigate and find out that taxation without representation is wrong, and in order to get your attention, all that tea you just shipped over here, we're going to pour it in the ocean.
That's
and then all of a sudden, a person has a perspective. It's an aha moment.
Right.
Ignorance and righteousness and self-righteousness and righteous indignation that says, I'm right, I'm always right, I have 100% of this perspective, you're wrong, is what I've kind of experienced from people comfortable in their own bubble of ideologies. And that's, to me, it's very typical of religion. It's very typical of Republicans or whatever. And here she is saying, let's have a conversation. I would like to hear why you think charter schools are good for Tennessee and insure Tennessee is bad for Tennessee.
Right.
Because from where I'm standing, I don't understand it. You're a logical, rational, reasonable person. You obviously do have an understanding that I don't. Please explain it to me and explain it to the people that you represent. Or whatever. I mean, just come. There's an old scripture in the Old Testament that says, come, let us reason together.
Yeah.
It's right there in the Bible, and I wish that more people would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that was pretty clear is it is like religion.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is religion. It's a kind of a way of understanding, a way of mythologizing. Thank you. The stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. I mean, and so it is like a.
What is Republicanism or?
Well, just politics, you know. I mean,
Yeah, don't bother me with the facts.
Yeah, right. Facts are for suckers.
And facts are subjective.
Yeah, right. Oh, jeez. And they clearly don't know about facts. You know, they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Even. But it's almost like Stephen Colbert's truthiness. This notion of, well, I look at something, and if it doesn't feel true, it's not true. You know, it's going to feel true.
Right.
Well, anyway.
So if you want to learn more about Gayle or support her campaign, her website is Gayle Jordan, and that's Gayle with a Y, Gayle.
Right.
Gayle Jordan for Senate, and that's FOR, the word for. Gayle Jordan for Senate 14.com.
Right.
And then, secondly, ladyfreethinker.org is Nina Jackel's website. So
sounds good.
Thanks for coming on, Bob.
Yeah, good being here. Always good. I love this show. It was a good one.
Yeah, it'll be good. Bye-bye.